Welcome back to A Better Conversation, a podcast put on by Better Texas. As always, I'm your host, Chris Clement, joined also as always by the man, the myth, the mustache, the beard, and the weird, Mr. Kyle Mason.
Yes, hopefully not too weird, but I'm very excited about tonight getting into, now that we are in officially primary season, getting into the nitty gritty of politics, especially local politics. So let's get into it.
And if you stick around for long enough, you'll get to hear about some of the weird stuff Kyle did last weekend.
It's gonna be good.
Well, this week we are joined once again by Mr. Shelby Williams. Thanks for coming, Shelby.
Glad to be back here. Thanks, Chris.
I can't remember if you were officially a candidate or not last time we talked to you, but you are now a candidate for Collin County Commissioner. Is it 4?
Precinct 4.
Precinct 4. Okay. Would you mind telling our audience about where Precinct 4 is?
It's most of Plano, west of 75, West Allen with a little bit of East Allen, east of 75, and the Collin County portion of North Dallas.
So, long story short, what are some of the big issues going on in that particular race?
Ironically, none of the issues that actually matter to people. Therefore, the biggest issues that I'm focusing on for Collin County is one of the fastest growing counties in the entire country, is smart growth and development. We got about 1.3 million people in the county right now. We're going to top out over 3 million, probably closer to 3.5 within half a century. And we can do that the right way or the wrong way. So that doesn't happen by accident. Water and energy are part and parcel to that. Transportation. We're going to have a shortfall in water in the North Texas Municipal Water District that serves most of Collin County in just 5 years. There's an anticipated 28 million gallon a day shortfall because the rate at which we're developing water infrastructure is not keeping pace with the rate at which people are coming and needing that water. Same issue with energy, but that's a little longer horizon, only 10 years. So 10 years until we have no water or energy. Good times. Zombie apocalypse, get ready. No, it's not that dire. It just means that we are going to start having real constraints that for resources that people take for granted right now.
What's the shortage for water? Is it a storage need? Is it a water production need?
It's all of the above. I mean, everything between sourcing the water and getting it out of your tap. It's a lot of water loss, a lot of water, up to 30% of water is lost to leaks in municipal water systems. We're also not building reservoirs fast enough. We have to store the water somewhere. A single reservoir stores a whole lot more water than a bunch of storage tanks or water towers. But there are issues with reservoirs. First, they take a very long time to build. They're very expensive, and they're contentious. The Marvin Nichols Reservoir is planned, but it's not expected to be online until 2070. And it's been a source of a lot of contention because locals there around where they're planning on doing it in Northeast Texas is they don't want all that farmland flooded, which I get. And there's a lot of contention about the folks from the Metroplex who use all the water,
Right.
Or at least a lot more than the sparsely populated rural areas. They don't want to have to flood all their farmland to satiate the water appetite for a bunch of people in Dallas, which I get.
So when you're talking about reservoirs, you're talking about lakes for a common person.
That's right, lakes.
Yeah.
There's only one natural lake in Texas, and we share it with Louisiana. It's Cato Lake. All the other lakes in Texas are man-made, and not all of them are used for water source, but a lot are. Like Bodark Lake is the newest one in the North Texas Municipal Water District system. It's not fully producing yet, but it's pretty well along the way, and that's where we're getting a lot of our water, a lot of our newer water. But yeah, those reservoirs, those lakes are needed for water storage replenishment. Like some of the water tables, not to geek out too heavy on this, but the water table in the Upper Trinity Reservoir, it's being depleted faster than it's being recharged. So the natural rate at which water goes back into the water table underground is not keeping pace with how fast we're sucking it out. And that's a big problem. That's going to start having real big issues with foundation structures, infrastructure.
So
it all exists in a balance.
I know this is like the sexiest topic, right? Exactly what we should lead off the podcast with is let's talk about water infrastructure.
Yeah.
I can only imagine the thumbnail that Kyle's going to be able to pull from this.
It's gonna be us in the desert.
The amazing headline that he's going to be able to put. But you
Just
so
with
you were
water shortage in 5 years.
right.
Yeah.
I think you said the apocalypse in 10 years.
Yeah.
Zombie apocalypse. Yeah.
I think we could run with that. Well, you were talking about water loss through I guess, antiquated and failing municipal water infrastructure pipes. You talked about building reservoirs. What is it that you on the Commissioner's Court can do to address some of these water shortage issues?
Twofold, really. One is for the Commissioner's Court, for development happening outside of city limits, we have a fair bit of control over what gets built and where. And part of the challenge is when there are new developments that are happening in an ETJ outside of city limits, extraterritorial jurisdiction, for those unfamiliar with the term ETJ, then all those folks need water. So the Commissioner's Court does have some capability to approve the platting for the developments and making sure they're getting sufficient water. Now, if they're not getting sufficient infrastructure, we don't approve it. However, because of the state legislature's decision many years ago to do away with forced annexation, that's causing MUDs, municipal water district or utility districts, to sprout like mushrooms. And that's causing those MUDs, they can be voted on and vote $1 billion in bonds, $1 billion in debt to build the infrastructure for a development by just a couple of people. Because it's brand spanking new. There's not a population there to vote on it yet, but they have to vote to create the MUD in order to develop to get all the people there who are then stuck with the bill.
So for those of you that aren't particularly familiar, haven't gone through this process before, you might see headlines with like 3 people vote to elect the board of directors for something. That's because when you form some of these districts, like a public improvement district, a MUD, municipal utility district, really it's the property owners of the affected property that vote in that. So if you have a developer that owns all of this land for the subdivision, and this is what's going to be in the utility district, you very well could have a couple of people are the only ones that are property owners within this area. They adopt the MUD, they pass the MUD, they go get the debt, and the way that you've got to pay it is in taxes, right? There's an assessment. So when you're paying your property taxes, if you live in one of these districts, you'll see an assessment. Now, when you buy into that area, it is required that it is disclosed to you that you are moving into one of these districts and you have the assessment.
That's right.
And then the assessment is used as collateral for the bonds that Shelby was talking about. So yes, exactly to your point, you'll have a handful of self-interested property owners, developers that will pay for infrastructure for their subdivision with your future taxes if you choose to move into that area.
Exactly. And the taxes that pay for those can be quite handsome. And having that MUD ensures that the people who are going to live there get the water they need. However, having all of the proliferation of all of these MUDs is, in the long term, in the aggregate, very wasteful. It's driving up costs. It's creating a lot of unnecessary infrastructure and issues where, when we're facing a shortfall in just 5 years anyway, it's one of the things we need to solve for. That leads to one of the second things that I can do in the Commissioner's Court, which is not a direct power of the Commissioner's Court, but is a direct power of individuals on the Commissioner's Court, which is relationships, working with state and federal officials, as well as local elected officials throughout the county and in neighboring counties to solve some of these problems that are multi-jurisdictional. That's where I've got a number of relationships at all levels of government and have regular conversations with other local elected officials from, Salina to Wiley. And it's critical to bring the right people to the table when stuff is happening, whether it's the dispensation of forced annexation that happened several years ago, or it's the creation of a MUD or an animal shelter. So being able to call on those relationships, leverage them in the right way, and get the right people to the table to work through issues where not all interests align is pretty critical to overcoming some of the biggest issues facing us. If we weren't growing as fast as we were, then the heat would be off and we could just keep coasting for the most part. But we are, and we can't.
Yeah. Well, one of the other things you talked about was transportation. It's one of the main things that I really wanted to talk with you about, and that is DART. So if there are other transportation issues, we can get into them, but I want to kind of front load it with what's going on with DART. I've been seeing headlines about Plano taking action and Irving taking action, and then DART trying to adjust service to balance out inequities. Would you mind kind of giving a bit of a broad overview of some of the main issues?
Sure. I'll give you the current snapshot, and then we'll do a dissolve, and we'll go back to where it all began.
Lots of editing for Kyle.
Yeah.
Perfect.
So right now, 4 DART member cities, there are 13 total DART member cities, 4 DART member cities have called for a ballot referendum to allow their citizens the choice to vote to leave the DART system. That vote's going to be on May 3rd of next year. Plano, Irving, Farmers Branch, and Highland Park have all called for this referendum. Addison considered it, and then they did not vote for the referendum at their recent council meeting.
Right.
They'll reconsider it again probably in January. Carrollton is taking steps toward a ballot referendum as well. We'll see in the next few weeks. So what this would mean, DART was created by state statute back in 1983 when the area was Dallas-centric. It's in the name, Dallas Area Rapid Transit, DART. And created by state statute, cities had the option to vote into it. So that required a referendum back then. The cities got to vote, their people got to vote to say, yes, we want to be part of this system, or no, we don't. If they voted yes, which 13 cities did, Dallas, Plano, Irving, Garland, Richardson, several others, Carrollton, then the cost of joining the system was that half of their sales tax, so state of Texas charges 6 1/4 cent sales tax, cities have the option of an additional 2 cents. So 1 cent of the 2 cents that cities can charge would go to DART forevermore. That was the cost of being part of the DART system, is a penny of your sales tax, which is half of the city's portion of the sales tax. Well, back when our people in Plano voted into it, half of our sales tax was Collin Creek Mall. Big deal. The Plano of 2025 is radically different than the Plano back then in 1983. It's been more than 40 years. And the city of Plano is...
Sir, I was born in 1983. I don't need to be reminded how long ago it was. I don't appreciate your tone, but okay.
The city of Plano, that 1 penny of sales tax is anticipated to be $123 million in the next year. To put it in perspective, that's more than Plano residents pay in property taxes in aggregate. And it's also more than funds the Plano Police Department. And it's not because we don't pay the Plano Police Department. Plano Police have the highest top-out pay of any police department in the Metroplex.
Yeah.
So it's because Plano has grown, our tax base, our sales tax base has grown, we have proliferated, all of North Texas has evolved, and the DART organization is not. So that's what's being voted on May 3rd. Now, the consequence to that, DART has accumulated an impressive amount of debt over its 4+ decades. Any city that votes to leave the DART system on May 3rd is responsible statutorily for paying off its share of that debt. Its share is not anything that was ever spent in that city. It's all of DART's debt across the entire organization divided amongst the cities on a per capita basis. So for the city of Plano, that's about $1 billion. Mm-hmm. And if we vote to get out on May 3rd, like here, full disclosure, full transparency about what happens if Plano votes to get out. And spoiler alert, I'm fully in favor of getting out now. I'll tell you why when we do the dissolve. We have to keep paying a penny of our sales tax until that portion of the debt is paid off. If our people vote to get out of DART on May 3rd next year, then all DART service stops immediately. I could argue there's not much DART service now anyway, but we'll still pay that penny of our sales tax for probably 8 years or so based on current projections until it's paid off. At the end of which we're home free. And that penny we reclaim, and we can do a number of things with it under state law. We could reduce our property taxes, actual property tax relief. So we're suddenly getting what at that time will probably be about $180 million a year from that 1 penny of sales tax. We could use that to offset the property taxes that people are paying. We could also use it toward economic development, community development. We could use it toward infrastructure, road repair,
a lot of road repair,
fortification, plug up all those leaks in the municipal water systems that the water's coming out of.
We can subsidize new Dallas Stars arena.
Yes, yeah. That is the win right there.
Yes. So there are a number of things that could be done with it. And I've seen the argument saying, well, we're going to have to keep paying anyway, so we might as well stay in. If you only plan on living in Plano for the next 6 to 8 years, then yeah, that makes sense. For the people who plan on living here longer and whose children and grandchildren plan on living here, I think that's a very short-sighted view to say, well, we're going to have to pay anyway, so we might as well stay in. What we're paying for now doesn't yield value, not nearly that much value.
And here's I want to actually put a point on that. So, in preparing for this, there was an Ernst and Young study that was done back in 2023, and it was remarkable. Mostly, the table they had of a breakdown of how much these member cities were contributing versus how much they were getting. So, Plano, this was back in 2023. They paid in $109.6 million in contributions to DART. Operating expenses, actual spending on the stuff that you're using, was $35 million, and that was it. So Plano was paying $109.6 million for $35 million worth of services.
Yeah.
Now, I want to contrast that with the city of Dallas. The city of Dallas's sales tax contribution was $407.8 million. But its total expense allocation was $690,500,000.
Yeah.
So the city of Dallas, and at the end of the day, for all the member cities contributing, it was $83.4 million paid into DART. Over $1 billion, $1,063,700,000 is what their expenses were. So they're operating at almost a $200 million a year deficit,
Yeah.
and almost more than that is because of the city of Dallas.
Yeah. Everyone's subsidizing DART in Dallas.
So let's be clear, the city of Dallas was not getting $680 million worth of service.
They were getting $412 million worth of service.
Well, no.
According to Ernst and Young.
They were getting $690 million. They were getting $690 million worth of dollars spent.
Right.
They weren't getting $690 million worth of value because the DART system, by its very nature, it's going to get its sales tax money no matter what it does. It has no incentive that drives normal markets. It has no incentive to be efficient, to create a service that people actually value, which is why even in Dallas, you can see empty buses running around. In Plano, it's rare to see a bus with more than 2-3 people on it. Most of the buses are dead empty. And if you'll notice, they've started going to the screen printed advertising on the windows since we turned up the heat so that you can't see they're empty. Unless it's night and the lights are on inside the bus, then you can see how empty it is.
I will say, full disclosure, I used to take the DART to work every day.
Me too.
Right, when I used to live in downtown East Plano, I take it into downtown. It was fantastic. When I first moved into Dallas proper, I would specifically live in places that were close to DART stations, so I could just hop on the light rail and take it downtown. I haven't for a second in the how many years I've been here in Dallas stepped foot or thought about stepping foot onto one of the buses. It's just not something that I'm not going to take the bus. But the light rail, that's great. I've enjoyed taking the light rail. I've enjoyed the TRE. I used to take the light rail down to Stars games and Mavs games all the time. I've taken it down to the State Fair, down to the zoo. But to your point, I am now more upset that I had to pay to get on the train, knowing that 1 cent of every sale that was happening in the city of Dallas was going to DART. How in the world, anyway, yeah.
To put that in perspective, every time someone sets foot on a train, not counting the Silver Line, I'll get to that in a moment. Every time somebody steps onto a train or a bus, that ride is costing $65.50.
All right, explain that.
Okay. The amount of money that taxpayers put into it compared to how few people actually ride the system.
I got you.
That one person, that one ride for that one person is costing taxpayers $65.50. That's the amount of the subsidy. The Silver Line is way worse. First, it's a couple decades late compared to what we were promised. Slight digression.
Silver Line, you're referring to the one running to the airport.
That's right, the one going to the airport. Just opened. And one of the arguments against this referendum is, we just got the Silver Line, so why do you want out now? Well, the Silver Line is also incredibly wasteful. Using DART's own projection for ridership in the future, like a ramp-up period before it achieves peak ridership, generously applying the future peak ridership now, the 20-year ROI for that, it cost $2.2 billion to build. With the very few people anticipated to actually ride it, it's at a taxpayer subsidy of $367 per ride.
Good Lord.
Now, I've heard from people who have ridden it, okay, it's very convenient. They paid $3. No, you paid $367 plus $3. And that's the hidden cost vis-a-vis the sales tax, which is part of how DART is able to keep this going and have no accountability. I'll go ahead and do the dissolve now. So back to where it all began. I was just elected to Plano City Council in 2019, and I started asking questions about DART. The first question was, how much is DART actually spending in Plano? Kept asking. Finally got an answer from DART. Oh, we don't track that. Of course you don't, because then it might be subject to an open records request. So I said, well, we want to know this. And we know to the penny how much of our money is going to DART. What are you doing in Plano? And the explanation was always, oh, we can't track that because it's a system-wide expense. People get on in one city and off in another city. Well, no, you can track it. Ernst & Young did.
Right.
Snapshot.
Ultimately, they tracked it.
Yeah. So in the 2021 legislature, I kept pursuing this. I was given some promises by DART leadership, which to this date in 2025, DART has kept zero promises. Precisely zero.
Good track record.
Yeah. So I was promised information, and it never came. And when it did come, it was glossed over. They never actually answered the question, which has been a favorite tactic of DART. So in the 2021 legislative session, Matt Shaheen, my state rep, filed a bill on my behalf requiring that DART to just disaggregate its expenditures and report how much it's spending in each member city. Needless to say, DART fought it tooth and nail. And Matt called me and he said, DART wants me to pull the bill. And I don't think, and if they give you the data you're looking for, if they give you the information you're looking for, are you okay if I pull the bill? So Matt checked with me. I said, okay, if they actually deliver what I'm looking for, yeah, I'm fine. So he dutifully withdrew the bill, and the information I requested never came. As soon as the legislative session ended, they didn't care anymore, which has been a repeated tactic, by the way. So time went on, and I kept asking, where's the information? Our DART board chair at the time was the City of Plano appointee. He was trying to get it as well. He followed up. Months and months dragged by. Finally got a report. It was like a 14-page report that I told DART CEO Nadine Lee to her face was a fluff piece. It went on and on, extolling the virtues of DART. And so what I had actually asked for, the actual question was, how much are you spending in Plano? It prefaced the report pretty much with a value statement. The value of DART is all of the money that the member cities put in, divided amongst the cities on a per capita basis. Well, no. Yeah, that would make any statistician vomit on their own shoes. So no, it didn't answer the question. And then it was just all these pages of how wonderful and lovely DART is, how many people it helps, how necessary it is, how many lives it enriches, and then buried on like page 12 with some data that I could use. It didn't actually tell much how it was spent in Plano, but I was able to calculate, again, using DART's own data, that for less than half of what the city of Plano puts into the DART system, for everybody who rides DART, or DART claims rides DART, we just get all those people free Uber. I don't think free Uber is an effective public transit solution, but it shows how upside down the whole thing is. So I got that. I was pretty steamed. And I lobbied for this on the Plano City Council. So in 2021, Matt Shaheen filed that bill on my behalf. Over time, the rest of the city council got engaged. And by the time we were coming up on the next legislative session in 2023, the Plano City Council established this as one of our legislative priorities going into the session. So now Matt filed the bill. It was just the exact same bill. It was just a fiscal transparency bill. Just tell us what's being spent, guys. And Angela Paxton co-sponsored in the Senate. She filed in the Senate companion bill. And man, now Dart really fought it tooth and nail. They called it a Dart killer, even back then, before the new Dart killer. They said we were trying to kill Dart by wanting them to tell us what they were spending. So the game was pretty transparent even then. It passed the Senate, committee and floor. It was killed in House committee. And we had Irving with us at the time. So as the years progressed, I was able to build enough support on Plano City Council that it was now a City of Plano issue, not a Shelby Williams issue. And we were able to gain the interest and support of other member cities. So it was killed in 2023. Now we come leading into the 2025 legislative session. After the attention we garnered in the 23 session, that's when the North Central Texas Council of Governments, the COG, took this up, and the Regional Transportation Commission. And with the pressure brought to bear, we finally got that Ernst & Young study. So the Ernst & Young study was, again, just a snapshot, moment-in-time study. It didn't do what the bill was supposed to do, which was do this on an ongoing basis and provide that ongoing transparency. But the Ernst & Young study finally told us all what we already knew, which is that some cities are heavily subsidizing others in terms of what's spent in that city. But I think that still obfuscates the underlying issue, which is that DART is incredibly wasteful. Because for whatever is ostensibly spent in the city of Plano, we ain't getting that much value out of it.
Well, the thing that one of the things that caught my eye, so the Dallas obviously is the top contributor to DART. Plano and Irving, second and third. In Irving, if you look at the total, it's like, oh, well, Irving is contributing $102 million and they're getting $123.5 million in expenditures.
Mm-hmm.
But of that, more than half of that number is capital depreciation and interest. Right? When you look at the actual operating expenses in Irving, it's $59 million. So like more than half of even that is just like accounting gobbledygook.
Yeah.
To make it look like Irving's getting a lot more for its money, but it's not. It's very much not.
Yeah, none of the cities are getting what they're paying into it, regardless of whether they receive a subsidy. And that's one of the things. Irving's council voted unanimously for this referendum too, even though they are ostensibly a subsidy recipient.
Yeah.
Because they've got a lack of partnership and poor service from DART in their city for a very long time. And we were still waiting the results of the Ernst & Young study last year when I chaired a meeting of the DART member cities to pretty much air our grievances and get all the cities together on board to hear what was going on instead of having it filtered through DART leadership. And we had a coalition of 7 member cities with whom we were talking regularly who had these concerns, and DART was shutting all of us down every step of the way. They'd throw a little bone here and there, and the problem has gotten so big for so long. They're like, DART's going to spend $1.8 billion this year. $1.8 billion. What are we getting out of that? So yes, I understand there are some people who rely on public transit. How much is worth it before we just give them vouchers? But the city of Plano is already moving forward with standing up microtransit service to provide service for the people who do genuinely need it.
What is microtransit service?
Basically, smaller service via cars or smaller buses that provides more on-demand service like GoLink. GoLink and the paratransit service are some of the things that actually work best out of DART. In the city of Plano, last estimate I saw was that it can provide this service for $8 million citywide. And some of the counter argument to that is, how on earth do you think you could replace all of DART service, with $123 million in spend for just $8 million? Well, first, that's a bunch of money that's not going out to another city. Yeah. But second, even out of the money that is spent in Plano, to the earlier point, it's wasted. We see the empty buses. People aren't using them. They are not needed. Why are we still spending money on them?
Right. I don't know who's using DART on a regular basis.
People who live on the light rail and work elsewhere.
You could give a $20,000 vehicle voucher to 90,000 people for DART's budget next year.
That's exactly right.
Hard to think that the ridership would support not just buying 90,000 people a car one time.
Right. Yeah, and it's a disingenuous argument. For the people who do depend on public transit, you cannot say that any expense is worth providing the transit for those few folks.
Which is what when I was, looking into this issue, I did notice that for certain media sources, every time they would cover this story, they would dutifully cover, okay, so maybe it's charging a lot of money in taxes to people that aren't getting much. But we did talk to this one 89-year-old woman with gout
It's a sad story.
who has to take DART every day to get her foot cream,
Yeah.
who, is going to lose her big toe if she can't ride the DART.
Is this lady not worth $1.8 billion?
How many other countless 89-year-old gout-ridden women are there in the Metroplex that you're just forgetting about?
Yeah. And it's a false dichotomy. It's not they are provided for irrespective of expense, or they are not provided for. It's how are they provided for? And I think in an area the size of North Texas, especially the size that North Texas is going to be over the coming decades, that we do need some form of efficient, effective, and fiscally responsible public transit solution, truly regional solution. DART ain't it. The proof is in the pudding. So 13 cities opted into the DART system back in the early 80s. 0 cities have chosen to join the DART system since then. They want no part of it. Allen, Frisco, McKinney, like Frisco and McKinney, they contract with DART for a la carte services that make sense for their city. They want nothing to do with being a DART member city, because then they ship out half their sales tax. And it's ironic. If you're a member city, the city gets no say in how DART operates in the city. Right. We get no say. We get to appoint our 1.5 board members, but statutorily, the city of Dallas has majority board control. So you can guess how most of those board votes go.
Yeah.
And so we get no say, paying $123 million a year. Frisco and McKinney, they contract for a la carte services. They spend way, way less, and they get complete say because they're contracting.
Yeah.
That almost sounds like a free market solution.
Right.
Yeah, they have the leverage. Yeah, they have the leverage. Absolutely.
Yeah. And so DART is perversely incentivized to keep racking up debt, because the higher
the more debt there is, then the harder it is for member cities to leave.
Exactly. Yeah. Because we've got this, well, we're going to have to pay anyway. We may as well stay in. And that's why DART just spent $1 billion, I should say issued debt, $1 billion in debt for new trains and buses that are going to go just as empty, because the shininess of the trains and buses is not why people are not riding DART now.
Right.
For the people who do ride DART, one of the top complaints is that the buses and trains feel old, but they're already riding.
Right.
That is not the reason that people aren't riding who aren't riding. But they get to pile on $1 billion in debt just to stick it to the member cities who want to leave.
So I'm not riding DART because there's not a station near to my office. Right? I mean, I would love to drive over to Parker Station, park my vehicle, and then take the light rail here to the office in Dallas. The problem is that, okay, well, Park Lane Station or Lover Station are my two closest. Neither of them are really walkable most of the year in Texas. But
who cares? They have shiny trains.
Right. But I mean, that's my point. We're talking about making improvements. It's like, okay, well, if you had a Northwest Highway station,
yeah,
right,
like more stops.
These are 2 big office buildings and a DoubleTree hotel. If there was another DART station that was there, how much could that honestly cost?
Right.
I would absolutely take the DART every day. It was when I was doing it. It was great taking the light rail, the bus, whatever, but taking the light rail. But
if you're a big guy who looks like he can handle himself, I would not advise women ride the DART system alone.
Well, that's
not right now.
That's the other part of the issue. You talk about Parker Station there. It's like there's also like a homeless encampment / daily worker pickup area there, and it's like I rode the DART one time, parked there, and went down to the Stars game and rode back. And this is after riding the train for 2 years living in Japan. Did not own a car. So I got a very great comparison, and wow, like the DART is just trash compared to the train system in Japan. But regardless of that, I mean, yeah, it's bumpier, it rocks back and forth, but just getting out of the train station and walking across the parking lot at night, it does not give me any good feelings.
Right.
It's like you're coming, especially from the Stars game, you can't go armed, so you're coming across the parking lot, you're unarmed, and there's just people just standing there looking at you, and thinking, like, what do these people really have to lose?
Well, and tellingly, The Plano Police Association polled its retirees about how they would feel about getting out of DART, and it was unanimous. Yeah, they would want out of DART.
Yeah. I mean,
Like
it's
from a public safety perspective, those guys know what they're talking about.
Well, that's the hard. I mean, the hard thing right now is it's comparing it to Japan or comparing it to New York or any other place that has more public transit, London, stuff like
Yeah.
that. Well, you have to because you can't have cars there,
Yeah.
right? I mean, it's one of those things that's just like, well, here, if you can afford it, you'll drive your car.
oh, absolutely.
And you would absolutely, there's space for it, there's parking lots, there's all this sort of stuff. The reason I would do it when I was going downtown is because, well, parking your vehicle downtown every single day is expensive, right? That's a pricey endeavor. All of a sudden now riding the DART every day is a much more attractive type of thing.
Right.
We don't have that sort of, I don't know, concentration of urban center that rewards a lot of people doing it.
Right.
So you end up having a self-selected group that actually takes the DART that, yeah, you probably don't want mom hopping on the train with all the time.
Right.
Well, and that's the thing. I mean, they can buy all the shiny new buses and trains they want. DART's deficiencies are operational and systemic and fiscal. I mean, I've ridden public transit all across the Northern Hemisphere, and I have not encountered a system that works worse than DART. DART works the worst out of any public transit system I've ridden on the planet. I've never crossed the equator, so maybe there's some trash systems down there. I wouldn't know. But what I've been saying is DART is a victim of its own model. Because of the way it was created in state statute, where one city is granted majority control of the board, and member cities sign half their sales tax away forever, and because of the debt structure, repayment, DART has every incentive to resist change.
Yeah.
So like I said, the entire North Texas area has evolved dramatically in the past 40 years. DART has not evolved at all. I mean, it's piecemealed a couple of things, like GoLink, again, ostensibly one of the things that works best. It could work a lot better, I think, if the DART organization weren't involved. But it has every incentive to not change, which after that meeting I chaired last year, as we were going into the 2025 legislative session, this time there was a new bill filed. It wasn't just fiscal transparency. The member cities in the coalition had had enough, and a bill was filed, again, Matt Shaheen and Angela Paxton. This time, it was seeking some real restructuring. It was going to provide that member cities could get a quarter of their penny back for their own regional mobility expenses and some other reforms to the system. If we thought DART fought the fiscal transparency battle tooth and nail, they really pulled out all the stops for this one. And it was killed in both Senate and House committee.
Wow.
And we tried for 6 years. I started this almost 6 years ago. Well, 6 years ago now. And we tried and tried and tried and tried to work with DART to just reform the system, create a better balance. Like the other arguments of some cities expect to put $1 in and get $1 out. That's disingenuous. That's a made up straw man. Nobody ever said that.
Right.
Like we know in a system like that, there's going to be some kind of imbalance. Don't stick it to us. They've been sticking it to us. And vis-a-vis their value to everybody else. But every legislative session, DART says, oh no, we want a local solution. We want to partner with our cities at home. The moment the session ends,
Yeah.
Right.
Sendai comes, they're gone.
Why do you think it dies in committee? I mean, is there?
There are.
Hold on a second. The man's running in a Republican primary right now. He may not want to get into the details about why people might vote certain ways in committee that don't let the bill pass out or it dies there. We try not to put our guests on too much of a hot spot. So answer at your own peril. It's all the Democrats' fault, I'm sure.
Suffice it to say, there are numerous ways to kill a bill.
Okay, fair enough.
Good Tom.
One thing that was really surprising to me, I mean, it's ran worse than like a startup from California. Revenue for this thing, like actual rider revenue, was only like 12 or 13%. And I was trying to do the math and kind of figuring out like, well, how many people need to ride this thing, and before it even covers operating expenses, not even like paying down the debts or anything like that. And I kind of figured at the 31-day pass for local, which is $126. Once you break it down off this year's operating expenses, you would need about 5.4 million people to at least buy one of those passes for 1 month to make that happen. So that's about 62% of DFW to buy a 30-day pass at least one time a year to cover the operating expenses. And it's like, that's just never going to happen ever.
Oh, well, we'll get that many people easily buying passes for the World Cup. What are you talking about?
Yeah, I keep hearing about this World Cup. Like, they're building skyscrapers about the World Cup. I'm like, how long does the World Cup last? And
Well,
what is...
Remind me where the World Cup matches are being played at.
I have no
Nowhere
idea.
Dart provides service.
Correct. They're being played at Cowboy Stadium, and
There
I
you
think Cotton Bowl maybe. Is there any Cotton Bowl? They're mostly being played at Cowboy Stadium. Guess who very expressly made sure there was no mass transit? Mr. Jones.
There you go.
So that's ludicrous. Well, so one of the things I wanted to do, kind of wrap this up, transition to another topic. I wanted for our listeners, our audience, to kind of read through who the member cities are, so you know if you need to try to take some action. So we talked about already there is going to be a ballot referendum in Plano, Irving, Farmers Branch, and Highland Park. Correct?
Yes.
Okay. So in addition to that, I'm going to read the member cities that currently don't have a referendum. Addison, Carrollton, Cockrell Hill, Dallas, Garland, Glen Heights, Richardson, Rowlett, and University Park. So if you live in one of those cities, probably not Dallas, if you live in one of those cities, get on your city council about how much of your city's money is being burned on DART. And again, to Shelby's point earlier, half of the total possible sales tax that if you live in one of those cities is going to DART. Just imagine being able to double the revenue for your city.
Yeah.
What could your city do if the city government could double its revenue? Like Shelby said, how about some property tax relief? How about getting out of debt? How about not having to take out a bond to repair a road? Double your city's revenue. That money's going to DART. What are you getting out of it? What is your city really are you getting double your city local government's budget out of what's going on in DART right now? The answer is no. Get on your city council people on this issue.
That's right. And if your tax money is going to DART, it is not going to buying down your property taxes. It is not going to economic or community development in your cities. And it is not going toward repairing your infrastructure. You're paying for it anyway. You're just paying for DART as well. Addison and Carrollton may join the referendum. So if you talk to your council members in those cities, especially Glen Heights, they're not going to join the referendum. The only DART service they get is GoLink. So the part that works best, or at least worst, I should say.
Well, maybe I'm just sitting here looking at Glen Heights, though. I guess they balance out, the park, according to the Ernst & Young report. But I mean, my goodness, University Park is paying $6.4 million for 1.7 million at best in operating expenses.
Yep.
Like, people in University Park usually don't make investments that poorly.
No.
What are we doing here? But anyway, all right.
Yeah. Oh, one quick thing. The referendum election is May 3rd, Saturday, May 3rd, 2026. Now, statutorily, like a lot of the wackiness with DART is from state statute, cities only have an opportunity once every 6 years to have this referendum. So saying, why can't we just wait a while to see if the Silver Line picks up, etc.? You don't get another shot at this until 2032. And yeah, it's a lot of money to pay by debt, but if we get out now versus taking a crack at it in 2032, then over 20 years, the city of Plano will be, if I remember the calculation right, $1.6 billion better off, even paying off that debt, because guess what? After 6 to 8 years, we'll be home free. So the long-term investment, it's a no-brainer.
That seems like a good use of state surplus tax dollars, is getting out of some of that debt for DART. All right. Speaking about wildness and wackiness, so we have Epic City in Collin County. We talked about it the last time we were on the podcast. Much has changed since then.
Yes.
It's now the Meadows, guys. I don't know what we're done.
Yeah.
But we have the governor. The governor's been all over it. This has been a big priority of his, a big thing to shut this thing down, really on the grounds of all of this, like investment issues and issues with trying to push certain people out, and religious discrimination and all that sort of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
If you get on to the Collin County Commissioner's Court, what can y'all do? Like what are the levers you can pull? What could you do with regard to this epic city development?
It depends on the incarnation this thing takes at the time. They've rebranded, and they've been trying to thread the needle to create this development by skirting every law against fair housing and now securities. So I've taken 3 oaths to the constitutions of the United States and of Texas, and the laws pertaining thereto, and I meant every one of them. I'm not going to support a development that skirts the constitutions and the law. So for the county commissioner's court, the powers that it has is platting. Like we discussed last time, probably where this is going to need to go eventually is that the county gets some sort of zoning power similar to cities for unincorporated areas outside of city limits. For the time being, it doesn't have them, but so that's twofold. I will not support anything that violates state or federal law, fair housing, securities, otherwise. Now, I think when they went for the reboot for this, they spent more money on a new marketer, rebranded it the Meadows. So that's nice and harmless. But what's proposed here, quite frankly, an entirely religious-based community to the exclusion of other faiths, is completely un-American, which I think is my top concern. I've said many times the original promise of America before there was an America was the right to worship freely. And we also have freedom of assembly. Both are protected by the First Amendment. I won't say both rights are granted by the First Amendment, they're protected, not granted. But the exclusionary aspect to this is not at all what our country was founded on, and we're coming up on our country's 250th birthday, and it causes serious concerns. The most serious concern I have, apart from the isolationist aspect, is the imposition of Sharia law. The overt imposition of Sharia law is an absolute non-starter. Sharia law with a wink and a nod to the exclusion of U.S. law,
Right.
federal, state, or local, is also a complete non-starter.
Right.
But that's kind of how they're threading the needle with fair housing laws and securities laws. They're finding nuances in federal law so that they can structure what they're planning in a way that skirts that. That ain't okay. But where it comes to Sharia law, it says in Article 6 of the U.S. Constitution that this Constitution, and the laws made thereto, shall be the supreme law of the land. It's not ambiguous. So to the extent that Sharia law is held above federal or state law, that is a big problem, and I will not ever get on board with that. I'm Christian, but it's got nothing to do with faith. I'm asked why I don't support dominionism and a Christian theocracy, and it's because, in my observation, humans have proven to be awful, awful stewards of God's law, and I think the system that our founding fathers created and the tensions that are inherent in it are a great way to prevent all of that.
Right. Well, my issue, you talk about like the implementation of Sharia law. You know, it's you can be. It's kind of like the movie Footloose, right? You know, okay, are you allowed to dance in America? Of course, you're allowed to dance in America until you're in a small town controlled by one church where everybody lives in accordance to that, and dancing is banned.
Right.
Right. Can you still legally dance? Of course you can. But you're plucked down in the middle of this town with nowhere to go and no one to dance with.
Right.
And this is sort of what, you know, the rub of the Sharia law stuff out there in Epic is, from what I can tell, is, okay, yeah, wink, wink, nudge, nudge, you don't have to live under Sharia law. Oh, but the homeowners association,
You're gonna lose your
you
lease.
better believe, is going to be implementing some Sharia law that you're going to voluntarily sign up for. And, oh, by the way, you're going to be out there all by yourself with all of these other people that are going to be living into these standards. you better do it too, right? It's that same sort of concept. It's not necessary. It's that very, like you said, like skirting it technically. Well, technically we're not implementing Sharia law, but practically you are. That's the point of this entire development.
Exactly, and that's a giant problem. I will ardently defend anyone's right to worship freely. I believe in that with my whole heart, but I also believe in the Constitution with my whole heart, and skirting our laws in order to implement anything approaching Sharia law is a big problem. Now, I mean, you mentioned HOAs. There are restrictions on what HOAs can do by state law.
Right.
You don't just form an HOA and say, "How we've got carte blanche, we can do whatever we want." Same with Sharia law.
Yeah. Well, I've been looking at a lot of this stuff a lot, but I was listening to a podcast recently. It was Trigonometry. If you don't want to listen to us, it's fine to listen to them. They had like a Muslim scholar on talking about, I think the podcast was called 1,000 Years of Jihad. And one of the things that he talked about is that there is jihad of the tongue, which is essentially, hey, if it gets one over on the infidels, you can say whatever you need to say.
Yeah.
You want to, and the example he gave is in Spain, after they were trying to tell the Muslims, hey, you either convert to Christianity, Catholicism, or you're out. And so what they were allowed to do under jihad of the tongue is to sit there and lie and say, oh, yeah, I'm converted. Oh, Jesus is my number one homie. But then behind the scenes, these same people are trying to still subvert, Western civilization and implement their own caliphate.
Yeah.
That's the sort of stuff that whenever you hear people talking on behalf of this epic city development, that's the only thing that I think of is like, well, how do I know that I know what you want to do.
Conversation.
Right. You got on a podcast in Michigan and sat there and told everybody what the goal is of Epic City. Now you're busted. Now you're in trouble.
Yeah.
How can I believe anything that you say with regard to what you're actually going to do out there when we know what you want to do?
And the whole thing is like just really insulting just on the face of it. It's like people that, go to, they're probably like first, second, or maybe even third generation. But the founders of these churches were immigrants, right? They moved here, they built their mosque, like everything is good. But it's like insulting to be like, okay, well now that like we have our mosque, we actually don't want to live next to you. It's like, we're that bad? Like, dude, like there's something like, so you want to build your own neighborhood, but then you also want to commute into Plano and use all of our utilities, and you want to use our police services and all these things, but you don't want to live next to us. It's kind of like, that's not how we treated you when you moved in. Right. So it's just on the face of it, it's just very insulting.
Right, you're the infidel.
Right. Yes. Yes, definitely. And I think that's kind of some of the people's biggest issue is like, I think you have a lot of people that are afraid to say anything because it's like, because they will, and you kind of saw it over the weekend, but like they will very quickly, you are a bigot. Like immediately, if you object to any of this whatsoever, and people, that is still very powerful today. That trend is losing now, but people are still very worried about it. For the moment, people are worried about losing their job. They're worried about getting doxxed. And so they still kind of use that to their advantage.
And it's also, there's a balance to strike because we've got churches, synagogues, mosques, temples throughout the community. I've visited all.
Right.
And you generally have people live near where their lives are, whether it's work, school, church, whatever. And so we've got communities with greater concentrations of certain faiths, and that's kind of natural. People self-segregate.
Right. Sure.
But they do not necessarily self-isolate. Self-segregation and self-isolation are two different things.
Right.
And when you prohibit anybody who is not of your faith from participating in a community, that's un-American, and it's also, I think, dangerous.
It's dangerous, and it's very clear. It's like they don't want to necessarily assimilate to the American. I mean, I don't object to them not wanting their sons and daughters to start listening to rap music and taking some of the bad parts of American culture. I agree with that, right? But at the same time, it's like, again, are we that bad that there's 54 other Muslim countries that you could have gone to, or your grandfather or whatever could have gone to, but you're here, you chose here for a reason. It's great because of the values that we have. And now you're kind of going in the reverse, going to a community and building out a structure that, at some point, someone in your family tried to escape.
Right. And I have great sympathy for immigrants. My wife is an immigrant. And assimilation is absolutely vital to our national fabric and our societal fabric. you get pockets of people, again, people self-segregate. You get pockets of people who come from other countries, other cultures, and I think their cultures should be preserved, but not to the exclusion of assimilation.
Sure.
Like my house is a great example. My wife is from Russia originally. She grew up in the Soviet Union. So like she knows firsthand, the issues that kind of government causes. But Russian culture is ancient. And so our house is 85% American, but 15% preserved Russian culture. And we've passed that on to my daughters who speak Russian. So I think it would be tragic otherwise. But the key there is that all of these other cultures are coming to America. They have to become part of the fabric of America. Otherwise, there is no America. There's no fabric. And when there's no fabric, then we look like pretty much the rest of the history of the world of killing and enslaving each other.
That's the thing is, like, if you look back to the history of the world, you don't see a lot of Islamic immigration that ends with assimilating into the culture.
No.
You see Islamic immigration that ends in taking over a culture, taking over society. One of the things that I find absolutely fascinating is, and you guys may have seen these reels, these memes on the internet, where you look at Iran and you say, what did Iranian women dress like in the 50s and the 40s, right?
Mm-hmm.
Before the Islamic Revolution, what did they dress like? What did women in Turkmenistan dress like, in Uzbekistan dress like, in Pakistan dress like? When you look at all of these Middle Eastern countries that have been taken over by Islamic rule, it's not a matter of, we want to integrate Islam into Persian culture, like you often see Christianity do, right? Instead, what it is like, no, your culture needs to stop because we have to do this. It's Haram, right? We have to do this.
Absolutely.
That's sort of the issue where you just don't have. I mean, that is the clash of civilizations.
Right.
You have a religious ideology that is not allowing of assimilation.
Right. And that's where I think this has to be ultimately a cultural and societal solution. Where, again, I'll defend anybody's right to worship according to the dictates of their conscience, but that right has to be respected for others as well. And assimilation is absolutely vital toward preserving and enhancing American fabric. I mean, we are legitimately enriched by the cultures from around the world that get infused into America, but it is still America. And I think we need to have I risk using the word revival, a revival of American patriotism and a recognition of what American culture actually is to counteract this kind of isolationism.
All right. Well, Shelby, we're coming up on the time. We have a little tradition on this podcast when we have candidates for office, especially when we have multiple Republicans from the same, and that is, would like for you to say something nice about your political opponent. You're in a primary with a gentleman named Woody Huffines. We're both Republicans. We really believe that Republican primaries are a choice between good and great. So what's something nice you can say about your primary opponent?
Best I can tell, based on his career, he has financial acumen to say that he will not do what Dart does.
There you go. That was the big thing we talked about too. So thank you for doing that, right? I mean, it's important to us that, we can have mutual respect amongst campaigns, mutual respect amongst candidates. Now that you've said something good about your opponent, what do you want to share with our audience about your campaign, things that you have coming up?
Thank you. The date is not nailed down yet, but we are going to have a meet and greet next month in January. That's an MEAT and greet at a barbecue place in Precinct 4 in Collin County. Now, as far as my candidacy, I mean, the primary election is Tuesday, March 3rd, so it's coming up quick. And we'll have a smattering of events throughout January, February, before early voting starts. Regarding my candidacy itself, I served 6 years on Plano City Council. I rolled off in May, and I consider it a privilege to have served during some of the most challenging times Plano's ever had, namely 2020 and 2021. That was nothing anybody signed up for in 2019, but I consider it a privilege to have been able to be in office and help navigate through that. I'm a total policy nerd. I loved what I did on city council. Running for county commissioner gives me an opportunity to do pretty much the same thing that I did on city council, just in a different function of government, where I proved extraordinarily effective. I fulfilled all of my campaign promises, and I'm very, very proud of that. Likewise, we're facing in Collin County, like we touched on earlier, some of our most challenging times that come with very rapid growth. Plano experienced this. A lot of other cities have experienced it. Several are experiencing it now. And I have the experience to understand the pros and the cons of that. And every city is a little different, but the challenges from rapid growth are pretty much the same everywhere. Likewise, being a policy nerd, I've got solutions. I've got a ton of solutions. We talked about some of them related to water. I didn't even get into energy. That's a whole other podcast. But I've got the vision to carry that forward and make sure that we're applying effective solutions to these problems before they're bigger problems and not after. And I've built a network of relationships, like we discussed also, at every level of government over the past 6+ years. That has been extraordinarily effective, whether it's moving things through the state legislature, except Dart, bitter about that, but other things successfully, getting things done on city council and having an impact even more broadly than just the city of Plano. I've gotten the results time and time again and intend to do so in the Commissioner's Court. I'm very proud to be endorsed by both the Plano and the Dallas Police Associations and Collin County Sheriff Jim Skinner. My commitment to public safety is second to none, which, with all of the issues that face such a rapidly growing area and currently the 6th largest county in the state, the Dallas area, the Dallas-Fort Worth area, is expected to become the 3rd largest metropolitan area, I think, in the next 2 decades, eclipsing Chicago and Houston, and being outdone only by the New York and LA area. So if we don't want to be like New York and LA, then vote for me for commissioner.
Hey, Mom Donnie may help us rocket up the rankings. You know,
there you go.
In New York. Well, Shelby, again, thank you for taking the time. We always appreciate your willingness to come here and share your knowledge. With that, we're going to let Shelby go, and you'll have me and Kyle with some closing thoughts after this.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Kyle.
Welcome back to a Better Conversation. I guess we really don't have commercial breaks, but there's some change in the frame. You'll notice we're missing somebody.
Yep.
Shelby had to go do dad things, so you've got just the 2 of us. But you did a little almost like investigative reporting this weekend.
Yes. Yeah.
Tell us about that.
Yeah. So this starting the podcast and everything has gotten me more like, oh, let me go check this out. Let me go check that out. And of course, very big event that has kind of been around on social media.
Was it a very big event?
Well, we're going to find out how big it really was. Spoiler alert, wasn't that big, but happened to be right here in Collin County in Plano, which is Epic City. And the march against Epic City and this massive conversation that we have going on across America about the Islamification of America. And so I went to this event. I have GoPro footage of kind of what the event looked like, what the turnout was, what the general messaging was out there. And I think that the whole thing it's very interesting to see, especially if you as the viewer, I want you to see what you saw on X, and now you're going to get to see a different view of completely opposite, I think is going to end up being, of what they're showing you on X. Because I think it's been blown way out of proportion, and it's actually been fairly deceitful on what was actually happening. And then we're going to have a little bit of analyzation and I what kind of impact that's going to have for the Republican Party and the push against Islamification across America.
First, no impact on the Republican Party because this wasn't a Republican event. Like, that's the first thing. So there was this, and I'll go ahead and say what I saw. I was out and about in Plano, was not trying to go investigate it. I was out driving, scouting stuff in Plano, and I see a police car escorting a gaggle of senior citizens down the side of a road in Plano. And I'm like, right, what's happening there? Did someone escape the nursing home? Like, what's going on? So I pull around and I see it's this very small group of people walking down 14th Avenue in Plano, holding crosses, waving American flags in their fake body armor, I'm a military wannabe guy outfits, and holding signs like Islam is pedophilia, Muhammad was a pedophile, all that sort of stuff. Apparently, this group of people had gone down to the Epic Mosque, and Epic stands for East Plano Islamic Center, to wave bacon and piglets or whatever they were doing down there and yell at people, go back to your own country.
There was a lot of that.
Because of the Epic City development, which is a separate thing. I guess Epic is the commonality there, East Plano Islamic Center.
Right.
But they're protesting the it was just very bizarre from what I could see. And it's so dumb. Kyle will be more thorough and eloquent.
Yes.
I'll just say it was real dumb. There's not been a single time in history where the group of people yelling, go back to your country, are the good guys, right? Especially to the fact that they're yelling at this at people because they were at a mosque, with the assumption, I assume, that if you're a Muslim in America, you're from another country?
Right.
Question mark?
Right.
Yeah. You know, I think that's sort of the equivalent of going to a Catholic church and yelling at them to go back to Ireland. Or, you know, maybe in Boston.
I see the comparison, yes. But that was the idea. And I'll kind of do a compare and contrast on, you know, how Epic the mosque positioned themselves. And then, just a general, I mean, the whole thing was an absolute gaggle. It really was a gaggle. I mean, there was, if it wasn't for, which I will say this too, thank you, Plano PD, for coordinating that march, because the people that were ahead of that march didn't know where they were going. In fact, so you'll see in the video, there's these two police officers that are like coordinating everyone crossing. There's probably 15 police cars shutting off intersections and everything. So I think without them, that it would have definitely gone south. So it's going to be a lot of fun. And I have yet to see anyone that I guess was there post anything or make any kind of alternate reality, which is actual reality, of what transpired there and like what actually happened. And my biggest, you know, my biggest issue with it is like the leader of this march that put all this together is not even from here. He's running for office in a different state, and he came to Plano and inconvenienced absolutely everyone.
Yes.
So that way they get likes on social media and for the gram, and it's like, okay, man, like thanks, but like hey, thank you for leaving. I did not want you to stay. We'll pick everything up now.
Right.
Thank you. We'll pick up the pieces. I really appreciate that.
So a loudmouth loser from out of town comes into Plano, makes people more sympathetic for the Muslim population by being a total jackass.
Yes.
And then leaves to go run for whatever thing he'll lose in whatever state he's from. But he gets to pat himself on the back. Kyle will talk about it in more detail. As you can tell, I was very unimpressed. It irritated me a whole lot. You know, as people that have been actively involved with promoting causes that matter to people in North Texas and Dallas County and Collin County, to see some bozo from out of town come in and make an absolute mockery of a very serious situation.
Right.
Because here's the thing. If you're not actively following politics, you're not going to be able to ferret out the jackasses that were doing stuff on Saturday from the people that have legitimate concerns about Epic City being built out in the middle of the county.
Right.
It's just, they must all just be hateful, racist people like the folks I saw on Saturday.
Right.
So it was dumb. I'm proud. Hey, look, I am proud of Republicans in North Texas for not joining in, for not making it a big event. I think the fact that as much as they tried to push this thing on social media, the fact that it had such a paltry attendance, and as you'll find out, most of the attendance seemed to be people just sort of like curious about what was going to happen, but not actually participating, I think speaks volume to the quality of Republicans and conservatives that we have in North Texas. Kudos to y'all for not showing up and embarrassing yourself like those jokers from out of town. Anything more you want to add on that?
That's it. I don't want to keep putting more information out about it because it'd be like kind of a spoiler at that point, but I'm really looking forward to getting everything together and putting that out to you, the viewers, and the public, and that way we can not ever do that again, like ever, and let the adults handle the real situations that are going on, like Abbott is doing, like people across Texas that have big boy pants and know what they're talking about and can actually come up with solutions rather than just rabble-rousing.
rabble rousing indeed. Well, next week is the birthday of our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. So we will not be recording the podcast next week. We'll be taking the week off to spend with our families, but we will be back for the end of the year extravaganza. I don't know what that's going to entail, but Kyle has assured me that it's going to be the end of the year extravaganza. So you're absolutely going to want to tune in for then. As always, thank you for watching. We hope we brought you some value. We hope we brought you something that can be helpful in informing yourself and being a good member of society and being a good voter and being an informed citizen. Really get out there and make your voice heard on DART, because you're probably living in a city that's getting ripped off. You definitely need to make sure that that stops. But, again, follow us, A Better Texas. You can follow us on Facebook. You can follow us on Instagram. We're going to be having some big events to start the year in 2026 as we get ready for the November election. But we help inform voters on Republican races in North Texas going into the March primary. For Kyle, for myself, for the rest of A Better Texas, thank you for joining us with A Better Conversation.